Oh, look, he wears like all in one color. Yeah, the time he was different positions. He was kind of that. I've been there almost 30 years. Ella, they used to dress him like all the time. Ella, they saw him as like reviewer.
200 Orange Street, New Haven. For order, Honorable Shaw, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. The need of disability-related accommodation. Please call 3 business days in advance, 946-7651. Voice for 946-8582 TTY. In accordance with the City of New Haven COVID-19 requirements, all attendees must have masks. The members of our committee introduce themselves again. Right, starting with
Ernie Santiago, Ward 15.
Richard Perlo, Ward 27.
Jeanette
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, Ward 4.
Alder Jeanette Orson, Ward 22.
Perlo, Ward 18. Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Alder Ron Hurt, Ward 3.
Yvette Hamilton, Ward 24.
Frank Douglas, member of the committee, Ward 2.
Stephen Winter, Ward 21.
Anna Festa, Ward 10. Thais Walker Myers, Ward 23.
Thank you. For a brief announcement, I'd like to go over the plans to see for this evening. This is my first time chairing this meeting. So I want to thank everyone in advance for their patience and support. The public portion has concluded, and only committee members will be talking tonight. We have our staff, Tom Hayden and Michael Montgomery, on hand to assist us should we need additional information or support. So we'll be moving some items together so we have some flexibility to discuss them at the same time. But our intention is to proceed in the order of the published agenda. Item 1, expenditure of the general fund budget. Item 2, tax levy and other revenues for the general fund budget. Item 3, capital fund redesignation, no new borrowing this year. Item 4, tax grant anticipation notes, financial instruments that help the city's cash flow. Item 5, permits, licenses, and fees. We are expected to do most of our discussion on items 1 and 2. In the end, everything we vote out of committee tonight will go to the full board of alders and will receive a second reading and a vote and a special meeting on Monday, May 23rd. I want to thank everyone for their attention. And Mr. Chair, shall we begin?
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
I move items 1 and 2.
Second. I've been moved and seconded. Discussion. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would like to move a technical amendment suggested to us by the Bureau.
Second.
Items have been moved and seconded. Discussion. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would just like to call colleagues' attention to the packet of materials that we were given by Hayden. You should see a sheet of paper that looks, it's a 3-page front back staple piece of paper that has technical amendment. Yes, and for some reason I don't currently have one, but this document contains technical changes suggested by the administration. The first page, which I'll go through in a moment, has to do with expenditure and positions in the general fund. The second page also has to do with expenditures. But those two, that front and back of that first piece of paper relates to item 1 in our agenda. The third page, or the second piece of paper, the first rows relates to revenue. So that relates to item 2 in our agenda. And you'll also see a section relating to licenses, permits, and fees. That's a technical amendment that we'll discuss later in connection with item 5. And then finally, at the bottom, you see capital projects redesignation correction. That's a technical amendment for item 3, which we'll discuss later. So that's just oriented you to the pieces of paper that's in front of you. The font is small. I hope folks brought their reading glasses, which I know to put on. So on the first page, you'll see that there are a couple of positions in the health department where there was a correction. Corrective action is to acknowledge that we actually approved those items, right? And there's 0 fiscal impact, but the proposed budget was printed before we took action to change the title changes. Update was title for the current one. Same goes to legislative services, legislative fee 2 that then you'll see a series of positions where individual staff were hired either lower or higher than budget. From health department, library, police services, and you can see that there some of them they were hired more than budgeted, so there's a savings in those numbers. And then there are others where folks were hired above budgeted pay rates, those are not in parentheses, those are increased. Finance, supervisory auditor, that's a title change there, with no fiscal impact. You see all the parts in public works, mechanic ADA. The title is proposed to change to mechanic AD, which is a new position number. Some of those title changes have fiscal impacts, like not. Parts and public works, a refuse position where there needs to be a salary correction. Corporation Council Labor Relations staff attorney salary correction. We heard about this in our discussion with the Chief Administrative Officer group. No, Corporation Council, which I think is personally talked to us about how they needed to increase the starting salary for that position and attract a qualified person for the job at current pay rates. So this is a proposed amendment. TTP, there was a salary correction for the director. Flipping over to the next page. Additional overtime for Sunday hours, $40,000 increase. Gordy gave us a hint during the library presentation that the increase in the library aid budget may not be sufficient to cover all of the additional staff costs related to Sunday hours. And so this additional amount for overtime is intended to help that. Correction to budget salary amount for item 1308, 101, 05, 110. I don't see what that is. Increased costs for lease and storage. Increase of $50,000. Moving chief technology officer to the mayor's office. Also, there's an increase. Well, actually, that's a budget neutral issue because it's an increase of 80 and then a decrease. Right, so it's just relocating part of the organization from one division to another. There's some corrections to administrative expenses and contributions that cancels are out. Moving funding for early childhood, other contractual, and community resilience to CSA administration. So increases $50,000 in one place and decreases $50,000 in another. A couple of other miscellaneous corrections to the budget. And then finally, on this collection of expenditure lines, moving the Q House funding line items from CSA to the back. So it takes $7,000 out of one department and puts it in another. So the net impact of all of these changes on the first page, the net impact is an increase of $25,162. And the next page is $17,882. I had added that up. Okay, that's a big one. That's 44,000. Leading to 4,044. $40,044. The net increase to the general fund budget of all those corrections. But that's item one. This technical amendment increases expenditures by a net $43,044. When we look at the general fund revenue, we see that the state passed a budget that included higher capital lower vehicle tax, right? Which produces additional revenue for the city of Wayne in the form of those taxes. But it also decreases the pilot they were getting from the state in this creation of the work back. And the net effect of those two things, more revenue and a lower pilot, is an increase in revenue of $55,000. Right? So when you take these technical changes together, both on the expenditure side and on the revenue side, it produces a gap, a positive surplus of $12,000, which don't panic, we will deal with that in the next item. But it's certainly not, poking a hole in our budget. So that, in some detail, is the technical amendment that the staff wrote me as wasn't. And I would recommend calling it. Sure.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Yes.
Alder. Bassett?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just a comment on this and thing. We have time. For whatever reason, I mean, I know it's a rush and it's $12,000, more than I'm taking care of. But just
Further discussion? Alder.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to say that I think the small increase in the labor related staff attorney is a worthy idea. We've heard about on bills, and we've also heard from bargaining units that there are significant delays in getting negotiations settled with the city. So hopefully, increasing the salary allows us to help and helps give that staff they need to complete those negotiations in time. Thank you. Chair.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstained? Amendment passes. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would like to move the amendment from you, Mr. Vice Chair, and me.
Motion moving the second discussion to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I will now call my colleagues' attention to the second piece of paper in the stapled packet, which should be the first page following the agenda. It has the watermark ground. It also says stockholder account. So hopefully that. This is an amendment that would change item 1 or the general fund expense budget, and item 2, the tax levy HW2. And then it walks through what the changes are. the mayor's proposed budget increases the board of education by $5 million. This amendment would decrease that increase by $500,000. And so it would reduce the total city allocation for that, the total allocation for that from $195,762,784 to $195,263,784. On personnel, there are some number of personnel requests, new positions, all of these are new positions. That this amendment would eliminate from there, but the request to move two positions from special funds to general funds that would be qualified, right? This amendment doesn't do that. So that's the primary technology supervisor position and the personal computer technician. When we add them all, it is $120,400. Fire service. There are 3 capital positions among them that this the mayor's proposed budget has to the budget. This is an help. That totals $405,800. Public health. There was a proposal to add 2 new public health nurses at a total of $91,002. This amendment reduces funding for those positions to $1 each. City initiatives. There was a proposal to create 2 neighborhood special positions in the general fund budget, costing $54,158 each. This amendment removes that. It's not. Wait. These reductions of the board of ed for these positions in these 4 departments generate a total savings of $1,225,638. The savings will be applied in the following ways, and this is going to be a little bit different of a number. It's on a sheet of paper, so if you have your pens handy, be ready to write this down, because we have that $12,000 in surplus that was generated from the technical amendment. This will deal with that. And so the general fund budget reduction will be $18,951, not $30,000, but $18,951. The increased expenditure reserve line will be $1,206,687. The second part of the amendment addresses item number 12. The mayor proposed a 5-year phase-in of increased property values resulting from the recent evaluation. That proposal was replaced with a 2-year phase-in of these new property values. That results in an increase in revenue from property taxes in the next fiscal year by an estimated $4,969,049. But along with that is a recommended decrease in ARPA funding of $5 million. That reduces the overall revenue budget by $30,900. So there's a net effect there. But because we have a surplus from technical amendment and because we have the $18,900 in savings, all of this should balance out. And that is the amendments from Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vice.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair, would you give us that general fund budget reduction?
18,951.
Thank you.
Precisely $12,000. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Morrison.
Go in regards to the library, we did not feel as though right now was the time to change to add these 2 new positions. I did want to point out that in the budget, there's an extra, there's $100,000 identified for additional Sunday hours for our library system, which I think this is very, very important. You know, our people in our community, they need access to the library at all times, especially with things going the way that they are. And so I asked our committee to agree with this amendment, as this is one item that, as we went through deliberations, we listened to the residents, and they really spoke very loudly about the need for additional library hours. And this is the way that we did it. Although we weren't able to do the positions right now, we were able to make sure that we have these hours. So thank you, Ms. Vice Chair.
Thank you. All in favor?
I wish to see favor of this amendment. I hope we have all clear that the conclusion needed for the special mechanic and for the fire inspector and investigator. We should hold off on other decisions to eliminate at this time. Thank you, Mr. Vice.
Alderman Hamilton.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm speaking in regards to the health department positions that have been pleased at $1. I'm in support of the amendment, but specifically taking that action at this particular time. There's still a lot of vacancies in the health department, or nurses that have not been filled. So until those are filled, I think it's important for those first. And putting a placeholder of $1 in these positions, give us the opportunity to hire whether that is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Scruggs.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll talk loud. Sunday morning voice. Well, I'd like to, and thank you again, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd like to address item number 4, Livable City Initiative, and the and not funding these 2 positions. I've given this a lot of thought, and I'd like to bring this into perspective, because this is not a vote against any particular LCI specialist, whether we feel that they're doing a good job or whether we feel that they need training. The question is whether or not these 2 positions should be added to our general fund. Currently, these positions are under special funds through CDBG. And although it could be argued that to add these funds or to add these positions would not increase our mill rates, and that's technically true if we were only considering that these positions would only be for 1 year. Whenever we look for the drivers for our mill rate, we go to general funds to see what needs to be eliminated and what we should keep on. When we had the presentation of the LCI deputy directors, when they came before the Finance Committee, they did provide, in my opinion, a sufficient analysis to substantiate why we should add these positions to our general fund. We know that these positions are supposed to address blight in the city, but they are positions that, in my opinion, have no teeth. They're not able to issue fines. They're not able to issue any type of citations without the signature of the deputy director. And so I would ask this committee to agree with this proposed amendment and not funding these 2 positions in general funds. And I would suggest further on the record that LCI take a look at what should be done to give these positions more teeth and come back to us next year and let's take another look at it. Thank you again, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I speak in support of this proposed amendment, and I want to speak directly to the Board of Education reduction. I actually think that this reduction shows that the Board of Auditors actually paid attention to the very passionate discussion that was had around the Board of Ed, because if you look back to the last 5 years, this year, we're actually funding this proposal at about, numbers, but about 90% of what was asked for. And I think that's really important, and I know that we are all in tough times, we're all struggling, we're all trying to figure out how to do more with less. And I just hope that the Board of Education continue to be looking for savings. And so really nail down how they can actually come up with a budget that they can live within. I think this actually shows that we pay attention. And I'll talk more after the item is amended. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Vesta.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. While I support most of what was amended by the Chair and Vice Chair, there are a few items that and one of the items is actually with the board that now my children are in public school students. I work in public schools, especially in our city where we have incredible amount of diversity. But I feel like the board is transparent enough for me because they mentioned that the educational cost sharing has been stable, when in fact it has increased over $2 million each year since about 2020. Actually, fiscal year 20, it was by 2.9 million, fiscal year 21, 2.3, fiscal year 22, 2.3, and the final approved budget for the fiscal year that we are discussing this evening was actually, the total was 163,956 million, so dollars. That's also an increase of over $2 million. So I just feel like, my proposal would be to remove those $2 million that actually was increased and give the Board of Ed $3 million. That was my proposal and my suggestion. And again, it's not to punish anything, but again, I feel like the transparency was there, so the $5 million that was proposed, I reduced the $2 million from the numbers from the state, giving them $3 million.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, it's certainly fine for all the rest of the department level. She also had that for the which I actually want to.
Did you want to make it out? Okay. I want to make sure.
And the secretary does do this amendment.
Right. Okay. And then the other item that I plan on amending is going to be the deputy for youth and rec. For the Department of Recreation, namely deputy director of operation and deputy director of administration on the general fund budget. I just feel like it's a small department and we don't, do we really need all these deputy directors, or can we change the responsibilities of some of them? And I do have a process that I would like to make later on. But for me, we look at the overall department and even speaking to some of the personnel, I feel like we need more field supervisors, and that will help what is going on out in the field. The other thing is, one department, let's look at our police department, so over 300 people and how many in charge? Chief, and then a couple of captains, so, and assistant chiefs. So when I look at like every department and how many directors and deputies there are, this is like overkill. But I will explain further later on. Little cities, just so we never heard from the director. The director was not there to answer most of our questions. We had personnel from their department. So that too was a little disturbing for me anyway. It's an opportunity for us to come before us. And the other item is, the engineering, chief civil engineer position. And look, it's not that I don't want to give anybody. If you noticed, everything that I agree with in this amendment, or to remove positions, and the three that I just mentioned, are also, well, two of the three are also to remove positions. And one is just to decrease the line item amount. And the reason behind that is that this is a tough time for everybody, and we cannot afford to increase government. We cannot afford when it's 3 ballot season and I'm getting, desperate emails from my constituents from their aides saying, please, do something with the budget. There's a petition out there. We all saw, there's a petition that,
That's I'm gonna raise a point of order, just that you will have an opportunity to speak more about the referral reductions, but that's technically not a force. What the force is the reductions that have been proposed so far, and you agree with the reductions that have been proposed so far. In this amendment.
well, yeah, and I just wanted to make it clear that the two that I don't agree with, or the three that I don't agree with, I just wanted to simplify.
Right, you will have a chance to say more about why you have reduced further.
And, as far as the items that have been mentioned, okay, other than, Board of Ed, youth and rec, and engineering.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you. Before we go any further, I'd like to recognize our colleague from 28th Ward, Alderman Shafiq Abu Salah. Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think looking at the state aids education, we need to be clear about the separation between education cost share grant, or education cost sharing grant, and then other program related grants that the Board of Education receives from the state, such as the Alliance grant. I think that we could clarify this, but I thought that the clear message from the Board of Education is that grants like the Alliance grant cannot be used to replace things like teacher salaries.
Point of order, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
I do think that if and when Alder Fester proposes to make a further reduction, and that is clearly part of the argument, you should ask it down. But do you agree with the proposal to reduce the Board of Ed allocation from $5 million more for that?
Yes, I think it's a reasonable signal, like my colleague, my third board said, that we are making a significant increase to our local support of the Board of Education, but at the same time signaling that as many other departments are looking for savings, we're expecting the Board of Education to also, even with this increase, also continue to look for operational efficiencies. With regard to the Sunday hours, I wanted to note that the technical amendment also includes an additional $40,000, so it's $140,000 additional for the library. And we did hear in the presentation that the position for library requesting to be moved to the general fund or special fund, and that there is a possibility that it will continue to be special funded. So I think for me, we could revisit that conversation if the grant is no longer applicable to those positions, but it would make sense to leave them in special funding so long as we can continue to cover the positions. I think number 3 in the amendment is goal as my board said. And this came out of the deliberation committee, we're stressing that we have enough nurses to cover understanding public school. We have additional commitments to nurses outside of our public school building. And when I was really young in second grade, I had tons of anxiety issues. I don't know how important it is to have a nurse in every school. I think this signals that even though there are these significant staffing challenges for the health department, we still want to continue pushing in that direction. And then on the LCI, I would just like to echo my colleague from the 27th ward. I think we really need to reassess the model and how LCI specialists deliver anti-blight services. And I think having the mechanism for them to take it in the same way that open space boards can immediately issue a citation would be an important mechanism to add to their tool set. I agree that they need more teeth as it is present. Let's see. I don't, this may be, I'm not sure, correct me if this is not the appropriate place to talk about the increased expenditure reserve line. Okay. Unfortunately, I think we're seeing our return to the mean when it comes to our increase in healthcare costs. The increase we saw in the monthly budget report was alarming, a 12% increase year over year. The city on track to spend $100 million just on its portion of health insurance costs. And with the employee contribution, it was something around $130 million. And so I think that we need to get serious about the other post-employment benefits trust that under Mayor Hart, we got a significant increase in support for. So I think it's been 5 or 6 years now, over $400,000 put into that account. And we heard during our last meeting that it is, nominally bearing interest. I think we really ought to look at increasing support for that. And I would be interested in dedicating some portion, maybe half of the expenditure line, to getting our other post-employment benefit contribution up to $1 million annually, and pushing the administration to come up with a way to generate returns on those funds to help us build some kind of nest egg to deal with this enormous, it seems like, inescapable training that just keep accelerating away from us when it comes to those. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. I was originally raising just to raise a point of order, but since I have the floor.
And you can say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to quickly agree with my colleagues from the 21st and 23rd Ward in regards to the Board of Ed and the funding that we have approved. And it's good to note that the Board of Ed originally requested $9 million. And although I would have liked to have seen them get the $5 million that was proposed, I am happy that we are coming to the conclusion or to this proposal of granting them $4.5 million. I think this is in line with the rest of what we're doing with the increase in libraries, staff and time, the emphasis that we're putting upon our youth department, our young people. And I'd like to just end off by saying that the youth department is unique, and so we can't really go by the titles because these are people that are on the ground. And so whether they are deputy, whether they are executive or director, this department works from ground zero on up 7 days a week. They deserve the increase. Let's do it for them. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll have more to say about the overall budget later. But there was a piece of information I forgot to include, which is rather important, which is what happens to the mill rate if you do a 2-year period instead of a 5-year. And there's actually a sheet in our packets. Another sheet with small font. That actually gets into that information. Then you stare at your travel. It's too much by just reading the numbers. Under the number is 39.75. That would be the bill rate in the next fiscal year. If they do the case which is lower than what it would be under the mayor's proposed budget, would have had a mill rate of 42.75.
doing a full year rebound, right, having no phasing at all, we have a mill rate of 36. So you can see, of course, that it's larger than if you had no phasing, but it's smaller if you had a phasing that was more gradual. Larger years. So the 2-year phase-in mill rate produces, the 2-year phase-in produces a mill rate next year with these budget numbers of 39.7. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think the discussion of these phases is important to note that some of the largest beneficiaries of a 5-year phase would be our largest real estate owners. And we saw in our budget materials that the commercial real estate about 5 units or more had the highest increase in valuations, 55% versus 38% for real estate as a whole category. And the independent reported that the core share would have a $500,000 tax rate with no phase-in versus phase-in. I think, there's a question of like, well, how would landlords react to this? And I think that many landlords are likely to increase their rents with their new valuation, regardless of like the phase. They've gotten their valuation, and they're likely to go ahead and increase rents no matter what, like the phase-in or no phase-in at all. At the same time, we have many smaller property owners in the city who have also seen significant increases in their property valuations. And I think it's important to provide some relief and some time for us to get a handle on how to adjust this increased tax rate. So I think a 2-year phase strikes a reasonable balance between those two interests. And it also reduces our reliance on American Rescue Plan funding. I personally was really uncomfortable with using $10 million in federal grant money to balance the budget. And so we'll have those funds to address, hopefully make investments in other pressing priorities facing the city, where we may need it later on if we have the budget. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as amended? All in favor of the amendment, I apologize. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Any further amendments? All in favor?
Thank you, Alder, Vice Chair Hurd. I would actually like to make a proposition regarding the 2 positions in our.
You're gonna make.
I make an amendment.
You have to move it in.
Yes, I would like to make an amendment for item regarding the rec. I would like to have a second. Or at least discuss it.
I'll second your first discussion.
Thank you again, Vice Chair Hurd. My proposition is to actually use some of the leftover ARPA money that will be decreased to 2-year phase-in. And my amendment would be to replace the 2 general fund proposed positions for the youth and rec department to a special fund instead of using ARPA money. So it would be to replace the 2 general fund proposed positions for youth and recreation with ARPA funds for 2 years. That's 2 years. So the deputy director of operation and deputy director of youth administration for a total for 2 years to a salary of $389,904. And what this will provide us with is an opportunity to see what those two positions will do before we actually commit. And I think it's fair to just make sure that the titles and even the job descriptions fit whatever it is that they'll be doing moving forward. So that is my amendment.
Mr. Vice Chair, can I ask a question of clarification?
Yes.
Alder Costa, I believe what you're saying is to reduce two deputy positions out of the general fund budget. And if you repeat the number that we couple, of course, and then secondly, you're proposing an allocation of ARPA fund to provide special fund type funding for those positions. Is that what you're proposing?
That's correct.
And would you mind repeating again the amount of you?
So the total funds for 2 years that will cover the salary of those positions, $389,904.
One more question for you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
What, that would reduce the size of the general fund budget. What would you do with those savings? With your amendment?
Well, the savings are continued ARPA funds. So I would like it to go towards decreasing the mill rate.
Okay, so you would reduce the size of the general fund budget by that amount, which of course, thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Yes, all ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm gonna urge my colleagues not to support this amendment. I was gonna save a lot of my comments about the recreation department, so after I'm gonna say it again. But I just wanna make sure everybody understands. Since 2011, we had youth as a priority on our legislative agenda. We supported the Q House, and we supported a number of other things for the youth as far as jobs. This is a real investment into the youth department, so they can do some really good things for our youth, who we continuously see is no opportunities for here in the city. And if you really want to know what these positions will do, I can give you a little bit of background, because I was out there with the youth department during the whole entire pandemic. So when everybody else was sitting home and, like figuring out whether they was gonna go outside or not, the youth department was actually working. They was making sure residents, kids in the city had food, had clothing, and everything else they need. When they couldn't log on to the computer, they was offering that type of support to them as well. So I think any investment in this city, in our youth, is really important. I think if we ever have an opportunity to do something really good in this city as far as youth, we have to invest in the youth department. Over and over and over, we keep saying we want more cute houses, more shacks, more opportunities, more jobs for youth, and all of these things. We're gonna have to put some investment. So I urge my colleagues not to support this amendment, so we can actually have a conversation around the priorities that we just voted on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I believe we're, it's a total amount of $195,000. I think that's the amount we're looking at for the increase. And so I would urge my colleagues to not support this. This is we're actually playing catch up with these positions. It's not something that they're not already doing. We are now, with this amendment, going to pay them for the work that they've already been doing and give them the proper title to go along with it. And so I would encourage my colleagues to not support this, and let's keep this this amendment as we have originally intended. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd just like to note on the record, this is the number one thing I hear from my constituents is more opportunities for young people. And oftentimes that comes up in a context of public safety, providing young people an outlet for learning, for blowing off some steam, for being engaged in something positive, rather than getting caught up in something negative. And so, I think this is important support, and we've made significant commitments to the policing aspect of public safety. We also need to be supporting investments in our young people, and this along to the board education.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Vice Chair, I don't agree with anything that Vice said, that's why I'm compromised, because I'm not supporting any positions in my, what we have discussed. So for me, because I feel it's important that it's a compromise to use other funding for our youth and recreation. And look, during COVID, I was knocking on doors, particularly in the most vulnerable neighborhoods of my ward, to make sure that students did have laptops. And I made sure that the board of ed provided them to those that didn't have. So, my president, I agree with you. Yes, we needed to be out there. I was out there. But we cannot afford to grow government. Why aren't we supporting the other positions? At least this one is a compromise to allowing these decisions to take place. And then down the road, put that in general fund if we feel that that is the right thing to do. I guess it sounds like almost these positions are already filled for some of the comments that were made from my colleagues. These positions actually filled, that we're paying those that work with the department. I'm a little confused with that. And again, why aren't we supporting those positions? We're supporting this. If they're all on here, you would think they were all important, but for me, this amendment is a compromise to allow for these two positions for 2 years in a special fund using ARPA money, and then seeing if they should be placed in a general fund position. Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to say that when it comes to our children, and no disrespect to my colleague from Ward 10, we can't compromise our kids. Anything that has anything to do with their children, there is no compromise. They've been compromised too much for too long. And so anytime we have an opportunity where we can put people in place, put things in place that's going to enhance our children's mind, body, and soul, we have to do it. And we have to compromise on maybe something else, but not when it comes to the babies. The babies, they weren't asked, they didn't ask to come here. They didn't ask to be born. And so they're here, they're in our city, and if there's anything we can do to help our children, we have to. There's other places we can go, but not the kids. Not the kids. I cannot. And I too ask for our colleagues not to support this, because when you compromise our children, we're compromising our own welfare, because we're gonna get old. And when we compromise the children, when it's time for them to be in these seats, they're gonna say, let's compromise. Oh, I don't want to be in that position. So thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And again, I ask my colleagues not to support this.
Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Speaking in opposition to the amendment, I think all requested for her to attempt to find creative funding for positions. I don't think it's actually funds. And so I'm asking colleagues to vote in opposition to the amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. Discussion. Any further? Discussion. It's okay. Any further amendment? Alderman Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would like to propose an amendment to the expenditure reserve increase and reduce the increase in the expenditure reserve by $595,000 and increase our other post-employment benefits trust line, which would bring the annual contribution to $1 million. Currently, there's
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Hunter just made a motion, which needs to second it for you.
Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This would bring the total annual other post-employment benefits trust contribution to $1 million. I don't know the exact number on hand. I think there's roughly $5 million in this trust right now. And I think it's really important that we as a board and the administration continue to develop strategies for dealing with the rising cost of healthcare. And as I mentioned earlier, the increase in healthcare spending this year is very alarming. And some of that I think is things that were referred to the pandemic. But I think it's also a continuation of the steady increases we saw before the pandemic. So I think that if we're making larger contributions to this fund, that will spur the administration to look at creative ways to invest in proceeds growth fund, which can help the price on the rising costs of healthcare for the city. Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment? Yes, Alderman Fester.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just a point of clarification. You did repeat the actual on that.
So the amendment would be to reduce the increase to the expenditure reserve line by $595,000. So we're going to decrease the increase. And then put that $595,000 into our annual other post-employment benefits fund.
Any further discussion? Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Alderman, I commend Alderman Winter for thinking about this. I think that would consider how to strengthen the investments in the post-employment benefits. That will be for a future report. In terms of current healthcare spending next year, and so I'm willing to consider it. But I'm not 100% excited about it right now, so I'm probably inclined to not support it at this moment, but hopefully prefer to the
Any further discussion? Alderman Myers.
Thank you. With the chair, I would like to, what was that number you said is already? That's already in the number was quoted, was it 5 million?
I do not have those numbers. I have a fingertip, so maybe.
Yeah.
Let's look it up.
I think there's about $5 million.
The expenditure reserve line is 1.206. Because it was at a zero amount before that. he's talking about money that went to the Board of Ed, but there was no money in the reserve fund other than in for your right, 206,687.
Well, I don't know about that, what's in the amendment, just to clarify. Vice Chair, the mayor's proposed budget emptied out the expenditure reserve, right, so it's zero.
Right.
This amendment was 1,190,000. But actually, it's what you're correct, it's 1,206,037. And so what Alder Winter is doing is taking 595,000 out of that for all that. And our president's question is how much money is in the trust fund, which has been created over many fiscal years, and which is not, which is in some other part of the budget. And this Alder Winter said something to that effect.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I was asking those numbers for specific because that accounts already have that, and I understand the pressures that we will face around healthcare. At this point in time, I would urge my colleagues not to support this. Because right now, as we are having this discussion, the account that you are proposing to put the money in has a much larger number. So that is my reasoning why I wouldn't go at this present time, but I actually think we should pay attention to those things. And that's why over the last couple of years, we've always had an emphasis on all of those kinds of things. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Any further discussion? All Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe I'd just like to clarify that while we have a few $1 million account, it's like a fraction of what we are on the hook for the and the account hasn't grown enough, isn't large enough that we are investing it productively in the same way that we invest our pension funds, for example. And I think that by increasing the contribution amount to a seven-figure level, hopefully that is enough to attract attention to it and put the money to work. Thank you.
All Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. While I would like to support this, because any of the savings that I was proposing was going towards lower income or healthcare. OPEB right now is sitting in a savings account, so I think very low interest rate. What I would like to see before anything happens is proper investment of this money. And I feel like we missed the boat with the market being really high. We could have probably doubled the money if we were better at investing it. And I understand the challenges that our finance department has, but that's part of our thinking when we went on the finance. And I guess before we invest further into the account, we need to invest what we already have. That is going to at least make us more than what the interest rates are going out of getting right now. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. It sounds like we need further discussion on this, so I'd like to.
Thank you. Any further amendments? All Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. There were a number of, much smaller accounts in the budget that we discussed in our deliberations with city staff that at least the reports we received, were not being spent, close to what they were budgeted year over year.
Over winter, I think you're.
Oh, sorry.
Making an amendment?
Yes, you will. So, anyway, yeah, the largest one of those was the police uniforms budget is currently $325,000. And, I would propose reducing that by $100,000. To $225,000.
We'd like to make that amendment.
Yes.
Second.
And,
Amendment.
and then, using those, putting those funds towards the expenditure.
Mr. Vice Chair, let me just remind others that when we're doing amendments, we have to say I make amendments. State it very briefly, okay, a second, and then discuss it.
Okay,
You can use words like suggest or propose, but that's not actually an amendment.
all right,
So in discussion, you can suggest things to each other, you can, but when you make an amendment, I move an amendment or the word. But now we can continue the discussion of your amendment.
thank you for. So in our reports, we saw that the police department over the last 3 years reported did not spend more than $220,000 on this line. I think the reasons for that are very clear. We are well under budget in terms of the number of police officers that are currently on staff. And so we're just not spending as much money on uniforms while we bring on new officers. We also have attrition every year with officers retiring. And so, yes, this would reduce this line to what we're currently spending. And then help increase the expenditure reserve.
One clarification.
Yes.
And so reduce the police uniforms line from $325,000 to $225,000. I guess I would also clarify, I don't propose this in order to single out any one department. This was just the largest one of these discrepancies or over budgeting that came up there.
Okay. Just a further clarification, I have to take that $1,000 and put it in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Alderman Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Although I definitely understand and I thank you how the two goes forward for searching for various savings. But when I think about the uniforms, the thing that puts me in a position to not support this is because the expectation is that we get a number of classes and a number of new police officers. And as we do that, we don't want to run into a situation where we don't have enough money for uniforms to a certain degree. And then they have to come back and ask to transfer $100,000 because we need uniforms. And so because we are in such a transition time frame in our police department, I don't think that it's the most appropriate thing to do right now because of the fact we need a lot of officers. And as we know, and I align gas to everything because gas is going up, everything is going up. With gas, they got to get the uniforms here, more money. And so I just think right now wouldn't be a good time because of the fact when you measure last year, there wasn't a lot of movement over the last 2 years because of the pandemic. This year, we already got new classes, but I think they have other classes sitting right now. And so we're going to need that money. And maybe this is something that we can look at again next year because this is a more normalized, whatever normal is, normalized year in regards to employment. So I'm not in support of this, but I definitely understand. And thank you for searching.
Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm almost prone to support this because it is an excellent idea, and I think that we have a fiscal responsibility to look for dollars and cents, but without having the numbers to understand how many new police we're gonna have, how many uniforms we're gonna have with those that are retiring, because I think that's a very good point. I'm not able to support this at this time without having that analysis. And I think that when the budget was presented to us with that number, I am presuming that our finance department ran those numbers and thought that this was the best number to have for this budget. And if it's not, then we'll deal with that at another time. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Alderman Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I understand my colleague from the 22nd Ward's point. I think that when the department was before us, they said it would take many years to get up to the staffing level that's budgeted. But it sounds like there's a desire for more information on this. And I understand it, so I think that it is worth, it's worth crunching more numbers. So again, I would withdraw the amendment and we can work for.
Thank you. Any further amendments? So items 1 and 2. Seeing none. Discussion on the item as amended. Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I wanted to say a few words about this. This budget process is challenging, but we've been under less duress than we were last. And it's worth recognizing that certain things changed that have made our jobs easier for this way. There was an outcry from our community for many years about Yale University and its contribution to our city. And after this move, the administration engaged with the university, and we now have a new agreement that provides tens of dollars more for the and so those $10 million are in the budget, and that's good. We won some elections, particularly increasing in margin in the Connecticut General Assembly, and we have an amazing delegation led by Senator Moody. We have the votes necessary to reform the pilot program and to fully fund it, which yielded $49 million more to the city of New Haven. And that looks like it will continue. These are big game changers. Now, some members of the public are understandably asking, well, where's that money? And should we not just return that to the taxpayers as a big mill rate reduction or launch lots of new programs? And actually, much of that money was already spoken for the moment it was agreed to, in the form of rising structural costs within our budget. And when you look at the numbers, when you look at rising healthcare costs, an accelerating debt service payment schedule, necessary increases in our payments for police and fire. When you look at more money for the Board of Ed, like the $59 million is already mostly spoken for. Now that's not, we should still feel good that our city is on much more solid footing financially than it was before these breakthrough moments and these new sources, increased sources of revenue. But the administration also said, let's restore or create new positions to make up for the fact that for many years we've had to tighten up our city staff. Right, and so there were 25 new positions inside. And the amendment that we passed tonight eliminated some of those positions, but not most of them. And so I think it's worth pointing out that this board, this committee, recognizes that we need to provide services to our residents. And that
bringing the city staff level up in a measured and cautious way is the right thing to do for our youth, and particularly for programs that serve underserved or more vulnerable or more at-risk communities. And so it's important for the public to understand that this committee is supporting an increase in the general fund budget, and it's a healthy increase. Some of it is structural, we just gotta do it so we don't fall behind and find ourselves in big trouble. Some of it is also investing in staff that are going to provide necessary and important services and programs for us. But we're just doing it somewhat more cautiously in a more measured way than most close to us by the industry. So I think it's important for us to understand that. And I encourage my colleagues to support items 1 and 2 as amended. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? All right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would agree with the chair that, yeah, there's no question we are in an improved financial position, given the increased revenue from the state and from the university. And that those funds have largely gone to addressing our long-term liabilities and to the contractual increases that we see every year. And in talking to constituents about this, it's important, you know, I kind of important to stress that there are contractual increases on an enormous amount of the city budget, and that consumes a considerable amount of that revenue. I think it's also important to stress though that the significant liabilities the city have been built up over decades, and the work of trying to address them is not over. You know, I've been mentioned the OPEB fund tonight because, you know, the healthcare costs in our most recent monthly financial reports. We also have the, you know, the rate of returns on our pensions are still sitting at 7.25%, which is far above the fund performance for the local pension fund. So we still have significant work to do, and it's not fun or glamorous. And it involves raising revenue, and that in part is, you know, will come from residents. And so I think that nobody likes to do that, but it's an important acknowledgement. And I think that the shortened phase-in is part of that equation. You know, if we had $10 million from the ARPA fund this year, we would have to come up with that $10 million next year. And it's not like that money's just going to magically appear. We still have $5 million to come up with next year. But it's a more manageable amount. And I think in the longer view, it helps smooth out the increased amount that we're asking from our residents. But I think it's a better way of doing it. It's more modern and transparent and honest way of addressing the long-term structural issues we face. The last thing I would say is I agree with Alder Rochelle. You know, we do have these enormous structural problems, but we also need to provide services to our residents. And I think there's engineering position that was mentioned tonight. I think it'd be enormous amount of work that the city engineer's office does. And it's kind of mind-boggling how much our city engineer keeps just his head, and then all the work that his staff carries out. But at the same time, you know, from almost every street by word, people ask them to speed bumps, engineering related improvements. And I think that investing in these new positions that the committee has agreed on is going to help provide a higher level of service that people would like to serve. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Vice Chair, I want to point out also that our resources line items increased. So even though I have additional only a rate of $5 million next year, we also have consider our debt service line item, because that number is not flexible, unfortunately. We have to pay that number, and in the next few years, it increases dramatically, so that's keep that in mind as well. Which is why I feel at this time we shouldn't be growing government, because all of those funds can help with reduction of the budget. And still provide the services that we need, or at least take advantage of some of the ARPA funds that our federal government has so generously gifted us. And that's the only reason. Would I love to see help in all of our departments? Absolutely. But can we afford it? Obviously not. And the budget proves that. And it will continue to prove it for the next few years. So if we could decrease the burden on our residents, particularly those in those vulnerable neighborhoods that we want to protect. And I heard from them as well, and please help us. And by growing government, we're not helping them. And growing government also affects everything, pensions, healthcare. All of those will go up with growing government. And again, it's not that we don't want to see our departments get more help, it's just we just can't afford it. Thank you.
Alderman Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I first want to start by saying every year, the Finance Committee really look at the budget that's before us. And this year, I think we did have an easier time, but I think in some ways we didn't. But we had to really look at and evaluate whether we was gonna have new positions or not. And I think that it is really important to protect the people in those most vulnerable neighborhoods I represent. So I'm hearing from people in a vulnerable neighborhood every day, not sometimes. And I think we actually do that in this budget. I think we always take into consideration the residents when we're making decisions, because not all, I also hear from the residents in those same neighborhoods that they want services. When it's time to get the trash picked up, they want it. When it's time to get those speed bumps, they want it. And they don't really understand that our engineering department is not staffed in a way where they can get it when they want it. Right, so I think part of this and part of our responsibility is actually educating the community and those type of things. Because a lot of people in the community believe, because we got extra money from Gale, because we got the extra money from the state, that we shouldn't even be asking for anything, but that's just not the reality. And all of us are fiscal stewards of this city and do what's right for the residents that continue to say, help me, help me, help me. We all do that. We do it every single day. And we don't take this job lightly. And I just feel like sometimes we look at things in the short term, because that's what is right before us. But I think on this finance committee, we actually look, we try to forecast, and we try to take care. And that's part of our job and our responsibility as well. I hope my colleagues support what we just voted on, because it's really important. We have to give those same people in those vulnerable neighborhoods the opportunity. We have to. It's our responsibility as well. And I understand that it's hard to say to someone that don't have much, like, I need more money. I understand that it's hard to do that. But what we're doing today and what we do every day, we try to keep the city running and functioning so everybody across the whole entire city can have a good way of life. Thank you.
Alderman Hamilton.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I too I'm in support of the amendments to items 1 and 2. I encourage colleagues to vote in favor of these amendments. We need to continue to be physically good stewards in our community. Take care of our people. One thing that has not been mentioned, the 2-year phase-in brings our mill rate down. That's the importance to our residents. Anything that invests in mill rate, we invest every resident, whether you're a homeowner or not, we all pay taxes. So for that reason, I am in support of these amendments, and I ask colleagues on this, finance committee to support them. Thank you.
Also,
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm also in support of this amendment. You know, people are struggling. Those that are homeowners, they're looking at increase in taxes. Those that are renting are looking at increase in rents. All of us are looking at increases in utilities, increases in gas. And so as an urban city, we're all struggling in some way. We're all having to tighten our belt. We're all coming out of our pocket more. I was watching the news and there's a shortage in baby formula. Everywhere people are struggling and trying to figure out how to make ends meet. I agree in context with everything that I heard. I agree in context with what my colleague from the 10th Ward has said, and the responsibility that we have to make sure that we're being responsible with the finances. I want to thank Mr. Gormley and our chair and vice chair for the information that they provided, going through every line, providing us with information, answering our questions. But I don't think that we are growing government. I think that what we're doing is we're not buying a new car. We're putting new tires on a car that has 100,000 miles. And the treads are showing. For example, we're looking at giving more money to Corp Council so that they can find someone to do labor relations attorney. If we don't do these increases, if we don't fix these tires, then we're not going to be able to maintain government. And I think that's what we're doing with this budget. These increases are not growing, but maintaining the structure of what we already have so that we can continue to provide services that are needed. And so I encourage colleagues to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
all of us are. All session.
Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. I mean, I guess the question is, am I supporting all or changing flat tires or worn out tires? It seems like, even the other positions use the positions that they recommended, the library, fire services. Everyone's going to make an argument that they need to be those positions in place. And we just approved this board as a, this committee, that, approved some positions, but not all. I don't disagree, but I think at this point to take, we're all suffering right now. Groceries are going up, gas is going up, etc. My colleague, we have to tighten our belts at home. Well, guess what? We have to tighten our belts. And with that being said, we're going to support some positions, then we should support them all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate my colleague from that board's focus on this, and at the same time, I think the tighten belt analogy doesn't translate, one to one in this case. And I would use the example of the fire service mechanic that we all learned from the 18th Ward convention. We refused this position, I think, 4 years ago, and more difficult business rates. And just the other day, I sent the fire chief a photo of a fire hydrant at my ward that has duct tape and cardboard wrapped around it. Like, you just can't fix a fire hydrant. I don't think the fire department did that, somebody did something to it, but that hydrant needs to be fixed. And that's a critical service that we just can't tighten our belts around. I think that by bringing on some positions and refusing others, we're exercising an important amount of discretion. And that there is a reasonable story to be told about all 4 of these removals, about why we are removing them. Like we said, with the library positions are currently special funded. The fire service positions, frankly didn't figure an argument for these positions from the department. Public health nurses, we talked about the staffing issues. And with LCI, I think there's completely reasonable concerns about how to improve the model of service delivery for this part of that part. So I think that it's judicious in trying to invest in things where we have serious shortcomings, but removing positions where we feel like they're not worthy or warranted to do that. And then the last thing I would say is on the Board of Ed piece, I think that there's a distinction to be made between the alliance grants, program related grants, and the ECS grants, which go towards salaries. We know that last year we had a salary increase deferral for our teachers. We know we have this backlog of contractually obligated costs that we have to fund. I think the state should increase PCS. I understand this is something they plan to do, but they need to plan to do it sooner so that we can get help balancing this budget. In the absence of that, we need to come up with enough funds to allow the Board of Education to cover their obligations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of items 1 and 2 as amended? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carried. Mr. Alderman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I move item 3.
Second. Item moved and seconded for discussion. Alderman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move a technical amendment proposed by Mr. Berman.
Second. Alderman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Let me just describe this, remind you most of course that item 3 is the capital budget. There's no borrowing here, and there are some designations that are in the item that came to us from the mayor's office. The technical amendment is very technical indeed. It's in regards to line 43, capital redesignation. Is changing the project number from 1939 to 1988. It's just to make sure that it describes a project that's not yet done versus a project that's already done. And so it doesn't change the substance of this redesignation at all. It's just a technical number that was incorrectly entered. It needs to be corrected. And I encourage colleagues to approve this technical amendment. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Any further amendments? All Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is just a technical thing. You've probably all seen it before in the past. I would like to propose an amendment,
Oh my gosh, that's good.
Siri wants a vote. It's actually in regards to, restructuring debt service. Amendment regarding restructuring debt service.
What is?
Did I say it?
There's state clarification, this is an amendment that does not have the authority to, sorry. That's the amendment, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. It's basically what this amendment is. In the past, just an explanation. Mayor proposes restructuring debt service in a way that would impose long-term costs on the city, and if the mayor opposed these, there would be a public hearing. Back in 2014, that stopped, and it was a smaller committee that basically suggested where making the decision, which is fine. It's not, not trusting the smaller group that they can't make a well-informed decision, but it would no longer involve a public process. So with these long-term costs, and this is for the long-term costs, because there's also smaller stuff that goes on, et cetera. With these decisions, if long-term costs are imposed, a process allowing public hearing is a better, more transparent way of doing business. Like we do with all our meetings. And this comes up rarely, but if it does, it should be included in a public process. If anything, maybe for transparency purposes. And again, these are for those long-term costs that come up rarely, but there is enough time to do a public process. Thank you.
Alderman Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm gonna urge my colleagues not to support this amendment again. It does come up often, but people that were here in 2014, it was done for a specific reason. Sometimes interest rates change and things of that magnitude. So the small group that's put together is actually the president, the third officer, that is on a group along with the mayor, the council. So I'm just gonna urge my colleagues to not support this amendment. It doesn't come up often, but colleagues have the ability to talk to their colleagues every day of the week. So if they have any concerns about anything or any thoughts, they can always talk with them. I don't want to take a lot of time with this, but I'm just going to urge colleagues not to support it.
Any further discussion? Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I am in support of this amendment. I think there's a lot of nuances here. It's a very complicated topic, a complicated process. And yeah, I would stress that I think that in cases where we are taking advantage of interest rate change, and in the long run, over the life of all the bonds, we're going to be saving funds. I think it does make sense for us to delegate authority to leadership and to the administration, so that we can act quickly to take advantage of those savings. But in cases where there's going to be a long-term increase in our costs because we're refunding, I think that is an important public policy question where it would be beneficial to have a slower process with a public hearing and more input from the public and from other members of the board. So I think Alder Best's amendment strikes a balance between those two things. I would say I think leadership is incredibly communicative when these kinds of decisions come up, and I greatly appreciate that. I think in this case, if costs are gonna be increased in the long run, we ought to have a public conversation. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All Hamilton.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I am not in support of this amendment. Decisions are made every day. I trust the leadership of this board and the group to make crucial decisions when necessary. Sometimes we don't have the ability to get through the committee process immediately. But when the decisions are made here, it does come to committee and everyone is heard. So I'm not in favor of this amendment, and I ask colleagues to not support this amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those that are opposed, say nay.
Nay.
None fails. Any further amendments? Seeing none. All in favor of item 3? Say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay.
Are we not discussing that? Are we going to breaks?
Is there discussion to be had on item 3?
Here you go. All watcher.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think for the most part, these redesignations make sense. I would still like to hear more about the facades to commercial site industrial redesignation. And, you know, like with these other redesignations, it's very clear what the funds might be used on, like, you know, the senior center. You know where that's going. But it's not at all clear to me, you know, what these funds might be spent on, and whether we need to be spending public funds on investments that, you know, private business could make investment on commercial site. We heard a lot in the presentations about, you know, the condition of our rolling stock, to use Alder Carrillo's metaphor about running an old car. We literally are running barely, some of these cars that are running. We need to make those kinds of investments in our public assets. So I want to find that as a point of concern. And plant the seed of potentially we could use this to, you know, continue our investment in our electrification of our fleet with an eye towards reducing those maintenance costs and replacing the old cars that we fix.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
My comment or speaking against the item or just raising concerns about all the way so supported by.
The latter.
I believe the first comment clear when we speak on that, I say.
All in favor of item? Any more discussion? All in favor of item 3? Aye. All opposed? Item carries. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I move item.
Second. And I'm going to move the second discussion. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. There's no technical limit on this item. This is a standard practice to authorize the city to issue flow needs. It's a mechanical thing that needs to be authorized, but it doesn't have any bearing on the national budget or so I'm very strongly to support that.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Item carries. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I move item 5.
Second. I have been moved and seconded. Discussion. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I can move the technical.
I have been moved and seconded. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This
referring you back to this multi-page document with contents of the technical amendment. You can see that there were some, maybe not frequently used fees in the city plan portion of the schedule that upon reflection, the city plan department has decided it's a mistake to move from the budget. And that's what we have. The administration of a 90-day delayed demolition application of general plan, some extension, maps in the wetland map and floodplain development area. The proposal, the version of the budget we have, of this item that we have eliminates those fees and this technical. Yes, certainly, and the other one is about merging and changing the plan. So, this is a hardworking department. The interface with the public is appropriate for them to charge fees for requests that they receive. And I encourage colleagues to support that.
Any discussion? See, all you want to.
Point of clarification, where? Oh, there's, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the technical amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Back to the item. As amended. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm encouraging colleagues to approve the proposed item number 5 as amended. Thank you.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, the item as amended. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I wanted to just say a couple of things before we entertain the adjourn. I want to thank every colleague on the committee for their hard work. The attendance of the meeting. I want to thank, of course, John Eden, our fiscal analyst, for all the support in this process and year round. And certainly want to give a shout out to Mr. Harmony, our director and controller, for all of the support and the presentations over the course of that cycle. I'm looking forward to moving forward and going to a second meeting. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. We will entertain a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Any opposed? We are adjourned.